welcome to my YouTube channel, Fantasy World. Today I'm going to be reading the book called Winterhouse by Ben Guterson. Today we're going to continue with chapter 7. So let me go to that page. Let's get into it. So chapter 7 is called A Visit to the Library Just Past Midnight. And to turn the word past into the word look, this is how you do it. Past, last, lost, loot, and look. And that is how you turn the word past into the word look. So let's get right into it. Room 213 was small and tidy with a quilt-piled bed, a wide sofa, a cherrywood wardrobe, a television set, and best of all, a little desk with a Tiffany shade lamp on it. The room was neater, cleaner, and smelled better than Aunt Purdy and Uncle Burlap's house a million times over. This definitely makes the top 10 most amazing days of my life, Elizabeth said aloud. She pulled back the curtain that hung over the window and saw the lake, gray, gleaming silver in the dark. Huge lampposts cast a pale light away from the hotel and to the edge of the lake. In the distance, the massive mountain peaks stood like the shoulders of the earth. Definitely in the top 10, she repeated. She kept thinking back to the coin Norbridge had turned into a kerchief, and the thing he had pointed out to her on their way to the candy kitchen, and the funny way he had of explaining everything. I wonder if every day here will be as interesting as this one, she reflected, though in the back of her mind she had a troubling thought that there must be some mistake. It just didn't make any sense that she would be staying 3 weeks at such a wonderful place. She decided not to think about it for now. After a bellhop came with her sandwich and she'd had her fill, Elizabeth plopped down on the couch with a book. The lamp on the desk provided the only light in her room, and she settled in for some reading. It was half an hour later when she thought she heard something in the hallway. The sound was faint, and then it stopped abruptly, as though someone was standing just outside, maybe trying to put an ear against her door. Elizabeth tiptoed over and looked through the peephole, but saw nothing in the hallway. When she sat back down and resumed her reading, she felt slightly uneasy. She told herself, though, that if anyone had been outside her door, it most likely had been a hotel worker doing some sort of midnight check. 5 pages and of reading later, she got a glass of water from the bathroom sink, and as she sat and drank, she began to wonder what the Winterhouse library might look like. She imagined a modest little room with some shelves of books inside, and because she was restless and because she felt the late hour might be a good chance to see the library without anyone else around, she dropped the silver door key into her pocket and slipped into the hallway. A quick trip to the library isn't a big deal, she told herself. The photographs along the wall of the corridor captivated her. There were pictures of loggers beside enormous trees in summer forests, people in old-fashioned suits and dressed picnicking beside a lake, and plenty of pictures of what appears to be guests at Winterhouse from decades before enjoying some sledding or skiing or skating. There were framed pictures up and down the hallway, and Elizabeth studied each of them. One of the photographs reminded her of Aunt Purdy. and she wondered how her aunt and uncle had spent the time since she'd last seen them. It had been 2 nights earlier, just after she'd brushed her teeth before going to bed, that Elizabeth had decided to risk Aunt Purdy's anger by asking her a question. "What is Winterhouse?" she'd ask, standing in the gloomy doorway of the telly room, her bare feet cold against the rugless floor. The house was always cold in winter. "I saw a brochure about it on the table." "You shouldn't have been sneaking around and reading things that don't belong to you," Aunt Purdy said, not looking up from where she sat on the enormous recliner she sprawled on for hours every evening. She had just finished watching her amazing favorite television show, Amazing Animal Attacks, and Elizabeth was hoping to find her in a moderately good mood, though the fact was she had been worrying less and less about her aunt's tantrums lately. Uncle Burlap, who occupied his own recliner beside Aunt Purdy, was fast asleep, his head flopped back to make it easier for a wheezing snore to escape his mouth. He always claimed some issue with his adenoids accounted for his thunderous snoring, and both his noise and his whiny explanations irritated Aunt Purdy to no end. "I wasn't sneaking around," Elizabeth said. "The brochure was just sitting there." "You have an answer for everything," Aunt Purdy said. She cracked the knuckles of her bony fingers. For someone who sat in front of her television said so much, Aunt Purdy remained almost as thin as a popsicle stick. Then she stuffed a handful of cheese puffs into her mouth and kept her eyes on her program. "Like your mother." Elizabeth often wondered how Aunt Purdy even knew anything about her mother. Uncle Burlap was some sort of distant relative of Elizabeth's father, and so it wasn't exactly accurate to call him and Aunt Purdy aunt and uncle. But whenever Aunt Purdy wanted Elizabeth to be quiet, she drew some sort of comparison between her and her mother. "My mother probably had an answer for everything because she was smart," Elizabeth said, and then added quietly, "and she didn't watch television all the time." "It's past your bedtime," Aunt Purdy screeched. Then she lifted the stick and glared menacingly at Elizabeth. Aunt Purdy hadn't actually ever used the stick for anything, but Elizabeth was still intimidated by it. "I just want to know what Winterhouse is," she said. "It's a place where you'll stay while your uncle and I take a vacation we've been deserving for a long time," Aunt Purdy said. "But it's almost Christmas," Elizabeth said, though she knew this would not go over well. "Why do I have to go somewhere? Can I stay here while you're gone?" "If you keep pestering me, I'll let the people at the hotel know you shouldn't mix with any of the other kids." "I just want to stay here." "Go to bed," Aunt Purdy yelled. "We're not talking about this." And she clicked to a new station with the remote, shuffled her skinny body in the chair, and settled in to watch her second favorite show. Even famous people get humiliated. "Someday I'll leave here and never come back," Elizabeth said as she headed for her room. "Won't that be nice?" Aunt Purdy called after her. "Save us from buying more groceries." And as Elizabeth retreated to her room, she heard her aunt mutter, "Just like your mother," and then smack Uncle Burlap with the rolled up newspaper she kept by her side. "Hush up that snoring!" Aunt Purdy hissed. "Huh?" Uncle Burlap said. He always said, "huh," when Aunt Purdy spoke to him. Most of the time, he went on to say nothing more. Elizabeth let these unpleasant thoughts drift off as she stood in the Winterhouse corridor on her way to the library. One final wisp of a memory came back to her, though, about something she'd found 2 months before inside a book Aunt Purdy had left on the living room shelf. Elizabeth hadn't intended to snoop, but the book, 3 months on an iceberg, had looked interesting, and when she opened it to take a look, a photo had fallen out. The black and white picture was a young boy, maybe 10 years old, smiling and standing beside a merry-go-round. Elizabeth turned the picture over. Written there in Aunt Purdy's handwriting were these words: "Since we lost you, I will never love another child again." Elizabeth had returned to the photograph, returned the photograph to the book, and the book to the shelf. She told herself one day she would work up the nerves to ask her aunt about it. Elizabeth stopped thinking about her aunt and uncle, and followed the arrows on the walls. An unlit corridor that seemed to be a dead end lay ahead. Unlike the rest of the hallway on the floor, the lights here were turned off, and there were no guest rooms to either side. A sign on the wall beside her read "Library," and an arrow pointed forward. Elizabeth saw she was approaching two enormous wooden doors. Though the corridor was so dark, they were hard to see, even as her eyes adjusted to the dimness. She came to a stop in front of the doors and tried to turn the handles on them, but both were locked. On either side of each door was a narrow strip of glass window, so that by pressing her face up against one of them, she had a view of the library inside. It was too dark to see much of anything, but Elizabeth could tell the library was huge, much bigger than she had imagined. Even though all she could make out were silhouettes and dark shadows, still the space seemed to stretch far into the distance and overhead. A light moved near an opposite wall of the library. Elizabeth peered into the darkness to see what it was. A flashlight was scanning across a shelf of books. In its reflected light, Norbert was studying the volumes before him. He held the flashlight with one hand and slid a book out of the shelf with another. And then he opened the book and flipped through a few of its pages before sliding it back where he'd found it. He repeated this the next one, and then the next, and the next. Elizabeth watched him work his way down a line of books, and then Norbert stood for a long moment before the shelf, just looking at it. He stroked his beard, examined a shelf behind him, and then his light disappeared. What is he doing? Elizabeth wondered. She waited to see if he would reappear, but after several moments she drew away from the window and hurried back to her room. As she was about to close the door behind her, she heard voices from down the hallway. It's not open at this hour, sir, and that's all there is to it," someone said. Bellhop Sampson, the same one who had called Norbert away earlier in the evening, was walking backwards and holding up his hands in protest as he spoke to someone still unseen. And then, when he came into view, Elizabeth saw that Samson was talking to the man and woman in black. The woman in black. She closed her door nearly all the way, keeping only the tiniest fraction of a sliver clear so she could see what was going to happen. "We are paying guests of this establishment," the man in black said curtly, "and we want to visit the library. My wife is unable to sleep, and she is looking for a good book." Elizabeth was puzzled. Hadn't they brought a crate full of books with them? "The doors are locked, sir," Samson said. "There's nothing to be done about it." He came to an abrupt halt, and the man and woman nearly crashed into him. Elizabeth held her breath as she watched. The woman in black pointed a finger in Samson's face. "Look here, young man," she said, her voice a staccato hiss. "I insist on entering that library to find a book. Do you understand?" "I understand what you'd like to do, ma'am," Samson said, "but it's impossible at this hour." She stood fuming before him, searching for words. A throbbing silence seemed to fill the corridor, and no one spoke. The man in black flicked his head to one side and then the other before slowly twisting it to glare in the direction of Elizabeth's door. He was far enough away that it would have been impossible for him to see the thin seam through which she was spying, but for some reason his gaze came to rest precisely on the hidden eye with which she was peeking at him. She was afraid she might bump her door closed or jingle the handle. She felt so alarmed. "What is it?" the woman in black said to the man. He continued to stare at Elizabeth's door. Well, that is it for chapter 7. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and that subscribe button. And if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget that notification bell down below. And that is it for today. Thank you for watching.